Good evening and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Sunday, March 16th, year of our Lord 2025. And before I go ahead and dive into the show, just want to start off like I like to do. Please like and subscribe to the show right down here on YouTube. Smash that like, smash that subscribe button right there. If you like the video content, like and subscribe here on Sports Talk on a Budget to this YouTube channel. However, if you prefer the audio version, please go like and subscribe on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or basically wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe there as well. Let's go ahead and look at the show. So it's going to be a little bit different of a show today. How this is going to work. Obviously, this is mainly a football show. I've talked about college football and the NFL a ton. Shifting gears today, this is Selection Sunday. We just had the March Madness bracket drop like less than half an hour ago, basically the full bracket. So that is going to be my show today. In addition to being a massive college football and NFL fan, I am also a pretty darn big college basketball fan, and March Madness and the NCAA tournament is one of my favorite times of year. So that is what this is going to be today, is going to be my March Madness preview. So going to break down my favorites to win the whole thing, give you some sleeper picks from teams that are a little bit outside the top seeds. I'm also going to give you some of the under the radar picks for teams I think I can make a decent run in the tournament, maybe make an Elite Eight, potentially even Final Four run. And then I will go brag and then give you my top matchups or my most intriguing matchups in each side of the bracket. And then finally, I will give you my picks starting in the Sweet 16 in every bracket, pick all the way to the Final Four, to the final, and then who I think is going to be cutting down the nets on my birthday, April 7th, and be the national champion in college basketball this year in 2025. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the show. So first thing I want to go over is my top 5 favorites to win the whole thing. My top 5 favorites to win the whole thing. I think the favorite right now, to me, they're not the number 1 overall seed, but they are a 1 seed, and that is the Florida Gators. The Florida Gators are one of the hottest teams in the country. They just won the SEC championship, hammering Alabama last night and handling Tennessee pretty well this morning too. So Florida's a very talented team, back in the tournament again. Still really good offense, solid above average defense. They can shoot from the outside, from the inside, have good bigs as well. Like I said, one of the hottest teams in the country. That's why I like Florida as my number 1 overall favorite as well. My number 2 overall favorite is another 1 seed, and that is going to be Houston. Houston is a team, they in the past with Kelvin Sampson at the helm, they've been a defensive-led team and not great on offense. This team is still great on defense, but their offense is better this year. They can shoot from the outside better. They score within the paint. They still play that suffocating defense that Kelvin Sampson is known for, and they can score the basketball. I really like Houston. They're my number 2 favorite going into the tournament. Number 3, I know it's going to be chalky, but this is my third 1 seed that I think could win the whole thing, and that is going to be Duke. Now, the big question mark for Duke is the status of Cooper Flagg heading into the tournament. Looks like he probably won't play that first matchup against the 16 seed that they're playing. Maybe plays the second matchup. I think they may need him in the second matchup. We'll get into that a little bit later. But this Duke team, what they did without Cooper Flagg, surviving in that game against North Carolina on Friday night and then Saturday night in the second half, just absolutely putting it to Louisville, a very good Louisville team, I believe, as well. Put it to Louisville in the second half, to put them away, and won the ACC championship. Only lost 1 conference game all year, and that was on the road to a very good Clemson team. So this team, as much as I hate to say it as a Carolina fan, Duke is a team that can win the whole thing, and they are my number 3 favorite going into the tournament. At number 4, I'm going to go with the team from the Big East, and a team that you probably didn't think would be a favorite going into the season, and neither did I, and that is the St. John's, coached by Rick Pitino. Big East champions, won the regular season Big East title, won the conference championship Big East title. This team is on a mission. This is the 6th different team that Rick Pitino has taken to the NCAA tournament. He's won championships, whether it was at Kentucky, when he was at Louisville, won championships there. Providence, he led them really far. This is a guy who knows how to coach in the tournament and knows how to motivate his players, has really good players. It's kind of a transfer-laden team, but they've played really well down the stretch. Now, they're not the greatest offensive team, but they can defend with the best of them. They got good size, good bigs, and they always find a way in the second half to kind of pull away from teams. We saw that last night. The Creighton game in the first half was kind of just a slog, was a kind of a sloppy bad shooting first half for both teams. In the second half, St. John's took over on offense and on the defensive side, suffocated Creighton, and won the Big East Championship, and is going to be a 2 seed and my number 4 favorite heading into the NCAA tournament. And my number 5 favorite is going to be another 2 seed and another coach who knows how to win in the tournament, and that is going to be Michigan State and Tom Izzo. This Michigan State team, they were the regular season Big Ten Conference champions. Didn't look great yesterday against Wisconsin. Wisconsin shot the lights out, beat Michigan State in that semifinal game in the Big Ten Conference tournament. But when you saw the look on Tom Izzo's face, he was like, we have bigger fish to fry. This is not what I'm here for. They're there to make runs in the NCAA tournament, to get to Final Fours and beyond. Tom Izzo just knows what he's doing. He's a guy that wins in the NCAA tournament a lot and often. So I really like Tom Izzo and this Michigan State team. Jason Richardson's son, is one of the most underrated players in the entire country this year for this Michigan State team. I think they can make a deep run, and I'll get into that a little bit later when we get into our picks. But those are my 5 favorites heading into the tournament. Would love to see your favorites in the comments as well, or even DM me. I'll leave my email there. Give me your favorites and maybe your bracket as well. But let's go to our 5 sleepers, teams that aren't 1 seeds. They're not 2 seeds. These are teams that I think are sleepers in this tournament that could make a run to a Final Four and beyond, starting with the 3 seed, the team that beat Michigan State yesterday, and that is going to be the Wisconsin Badgers. This Wisconsin team is a kind of a live by the 3, die by the 3 team. They play better defense than you think they do. They actually play very solid defense. When they're hitting their shots, they're one of the most unbeatable teams in the entire country, as we saw Saturday afternoon against Michigan State. And when they're not, they can still play good defense and stay in games like we saw today against Michigan. This Wisconsin team, very kind of veteran-laden, a lot of transfers as well. I think this team could make a run to a Final Four. This team I like a lot, and they're my number 1 sleeper team heading into the tournament. At number 2, it's going to be a 5 seed and the team that just won the Big Ten conference championship today, and that is the Michigan Wolverines. This is their first year under head coach Dusty May, who led Florida Atlantic to the Final Four a couple years back. This is a guy who knows what he's doing, knows how to motivate teams, knows how to win in the tournament. He brought over his stud center, Vlad Golden, from Florida Atlantic to Michigan. That's been a huge dividend for them. They play really good defense. The issue I have with Michigan sometimes is they can't score with some of the better teams out there. So when they don't have a mismatch with Golden and some of the guys they have down low, it's really hard for them to score. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. Good defensive team, well coached under Dusty May. That's why I have them as my number 2 sleeper going into the tournament. My number 3 sleeper, and this is a pretty deep sleeper in my opinion. This is a 6 seed out of the Big 12, and that is the BYU Cougars. Now, the Cougars did not have a great showing in the Big 12 tournament, losing in the semifinal to Arizona. They got hammered by Arizona in that game, and it wasn't particularly close. So, didn't love that, but before the conference tournament started, down the stretch, they were one of the hottest teams in the country, knocking off teams like Iowa State, knocking off that same Arizona team that they lost to, knocking off teams like Kansas, and giving Houston all they could handle as well. This is a BYU team that is one of the best and highest scoring teams in the country. When they're hitting their shots and when they're scoring, they can pretty much play with anybody in the country, and that's how they went on that win streak to go into the conference tournament. So if they can get back to those ways and get on a little bit of a run, they can make some noise in the tournament, and that's why I have them as my number 3 sleeper going into the tournament. My number 4 sleeper, we're going to stay in the Big 12, and I'm going to go with number 3 seed Texas Tech. This Texas Tech team is a little bit of a throwback team. They play good defense. They play kind of inside-outside basketball as well. But this is a team, the Big 12 is an underrated conference. Everybody's talked about the SEC going into the tournament. They got 14 teams on the field, which is ridiculous. The people still talk about the Big 10. They got 8 teams in. The Big 12 is still a really good conference. They believe they got 7 or 8 teams into the field as well. Still a really good, deep conference. Texas Tech was one of the better overall teams in that conference for most of the year. I like this team a lot. things have changed. They made a Final Four run. Chris Beard is no longer there, so that's a big difference. But I still like this Texas Tech team. I still like the defense they play. They play a brand of basketball that you may not see on a night in, night out basis, so that might be tough for some teams. So give me Texas Tech as my number 4 sleeper going in the tournament. My number 5 sleeper is going to be Memphis. 5 seed Memphis, the American Athletic Conference champions, the only team to get in from that conference. Of course, no Penny Hardaway's the head coach. We know this team, yes, they didn't play in the toughest conference. They were the only team that got in from that conference. They pretty much dominated that conference in and out. But this is a team, they're very streaky. They're very hot and cold. But when they're hot, they can play with a lot of teams in the country. When they're cold, they could be knocked out in the first round by a 12 seed as well. So this is kind of a boomer bust year for our boomer bust team in Memphis. But when they're booming, they're one of the better teams, one of the top 10 teams in the country, in my opinion. So if they can stay on that roll, they just won the American Athletic Conference today. They could stay on that roll that led them into the conference championship victory, bring that into the NCAA tournament, ride that momentum. I think they can maybe make some noise in the NCAA tournament, and that's why I have them as my number 5 sleeper heading into the tournament. So those are my top 5 favorites going into the tournament, my top 5 sleepers going into the tournament. Let's go ahead and look at some of the best, most intriguing first round matchups, because these first 2 days are the best days in sports, in my opinion. Some of the best days in sports, in my opinion. You have 16 games on Thursday, 16 games on Friday, 8 games on Saturday, 8 games on Sunday. That's unbelievable. We're talking about, 48 games in 4 days? That's just insanity. I love every fucking second of it. It's so awesome. I will enjoy every second of it, watching pretty much every single game from start to finish, betting on every single game from start to finish as well. So let's go ahead and go over my most intriguing matchups for the first round. We're going to start in the South. And then the first bracket I'm going to start with is the South bracket. And right off the bat, I have one of my sleeper teams playing one of my most under-the-radar teams. And let's go back and list those under-the-radar teams, because I didn't get a chance. I went over the sleepers, but let me give you my top 5 most under-the-radar teams that I think can make some upsets in the first and second round. First one is going to be UC San Diego out of the Big West. This is their first NCAA tournament. They're on a 17-game winning streak. They can make some noise in the tournament, in my opinion. Number 2 is going to be from the Mountain West, and that is going to be Colorado State. Colorado State won the Mountain West, and the Mountain West is a pretty solid conference, getting 4 teams into the field, so that's a pretty decent accomplishment by them. I think they can make some noise. Grand Canyon's in there again. They had a big upset last year. Can they get another upset this year? I think they're another team that could definitely make some noise as well. High Point. A 29-5 team, one of the highest scoring teams in the country. I'll get into their matchup here in a little bit. I think they're going to be a team to watch out for as well. And then finally, the Drake Bulldogs. Drake Bulldogs are 30-3. This is a team that has been in the tournament multiple times. They have players on their team that have played tournament games. They know what to expect when they get into the tournament, and they're a team that can make some noise. Sorry, I was a little bit out of order there. Skipped one of my segments there. But let's go ahead and look at our most intriguing matchups going into the first round. And the first region I want to look at is going to be the East region. And starting in the East region, I'm going to have a team that I mentioned in my sleepers to win it all, and a team that I mentioned in one of the most intriguing in the most underrated teams to make a run in the tournament, and that is going to be number 5 Michigan versus number 12 UC San Diego. I love this matchup. I believe this game is being played on a Thursday. I will be glued to the TV watching this game. I love this matchup. That's going to be a really, really good matchup to watch. And then we have the 4 versus the 13 game in that same bracket, and that is Texas A&M versus Yale. Yale, of course, upset Auburn last year and made it to the second round. Texas A&M is a team that can't score great. They're a good defensive team, but not a great scoring team. Yale is a team that can get hot from the outside. That is an interesting matchup there. And then my third most intriguing matchup in the East region is going to be Marquette from the Big East versus New Mexico from the Mountain West. New Mexico was the favorite going into the conference tournament in the Mountain West and won the Mountain West regular season title. They're a very good team, and Marquette was one of the favorites in the Big East. Couldn't get past St. John's again, and that's why they didn't get to the championship game. That's a really intriguing matchup. An intriguing matchup we're going to have to wait and see who's playing in this game is going to be the 6-11 matchup. We have the 6 seed Ole Miss, led by Chris Beard, who actually made a Final Four a couple years back with Texas Tech, and now is the coach at Ole Miss. And he'll be playing the winner of North Carolina and San Diego State, the 11 seeds there. And supposedly these were the last 2 teams in the field, along with Xavier and Texas. So this will be an interesting playing game. And one of these 2 teams, whoever wins, North Carolina or San Diego State, I think has a pretty decent shot to upset Ole Miss in that game as well. Now we're going to go ahead and move to, that was the South region. I said the East region. That was the South region. Now we're going to move to the East region. And the East region, we're going to go with that 5-12 matchup, one of the most intriguing matchups in every bracket every year. And we're going to start with the Oregon Ducks versus the Liberty Flames. The Liberty Flames are the Sun Belt Conference champions. They had a really good record, dominated the Sun Belt during the regular season and during the tournament. Oregon is a team under Dana Altman. He's been to a couple Final Fours. He's coached in a national championship game. He knows what he's doing in this game, so that'll be an interesting game to watch there. And then we have the 4-13 matchup in this bracket, in the East bracket as well, and that is going to be Arizona from the Big 12, and that is also going to be Akron from the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. Akron was a team, really good scoring team, not a great defensive team, but really good scoring team. Arizona's been a team that's been up and down all year. Do the downs hit again, and maybe they lose in the first round to a team like Akron, who is thirsty for an upset, of course, so that'll be an interesting matchup. And then a team that I had as a sleeper team to win the whole thing, BYU. They get a tough matchup right out of the gate with VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. That's a team that we've seen them in the past. I know that was under Shaka Smart, but they can upset teams. They come from the Missouri Valley Conference. No, I believe they're from the Missouri Valley Conference. They're a team that is battle-tested. They've played well during their conference tournament. This is a team that could pull an upset in that first round. So one of my sleepers could be out in the very first round of BYU. That is a very intriguing matchup to me. And then to finish out my intriguing matchups in the East bracket, I have St. Mary's, who's coming from the WAC, the Western Athletic Conference, who finished second there behind Gonzaga, versus Vanderbilt. And that's another team from the SEC. This, I believe, is probably the lowest seeded team from the SEC outside of Texas. That's a huge matchup there. I'm interested to see 14 teams make it from the SEC into the tournament. I'm interested to see how they fare when they get outside of their tournament, when they get outside of their conference, start playing these other teams. Interested to see how they fare in this tournament. A lot's going to be riding on this. 4 teams is the most teams that any conference has had make an NCAA tournament. So that'll be interesting to see how they fare. That's actually 3 more teams than the next closest, which was the Big Ten, who had 11 teams. I don't remember the year, but had 11 teams, and that was a current record. So now let's go ahead and move to the Midwest, and we're going to stay with the team from the Western Athletic Conference, and that is the 8 seed Gonzaga, making, I believe it was said, their 26th straight tournament. Hats off to Gonzaga and that program. Hats off to Mark Few versus Georgia, a team that hasn't been in the tournament in a number of years. This is an intriguing matchup. Another SEC team. Gonzaga, of course, battle-tested. Mark Few, always in the tournament, like I said. This will be an interesting matchup to watch. 8-9s are always interesting matchups, of course. And then we have the 4 versus 13 seed. And the 4 seed is from the Big Ten. It's Purdue versus the 13 seed High Point. High Point is a team that I think can make a run in this tournament. Like I said, 29 wins on the season, high-scoring team, a team that dominated their conference tournament. This is a team I think could make a run. I'll get into them a little bit more in my bracket picks as well. And then we have the 10-7 matchup, and that is number 7 UCLA from the Big Ten and number 10 Utah State from the Mountain West. I like this matchup a lot. I think Utah State could pull the upset on UCLA. UCLA has been all over the map all year. There was times they looked like they could be a top 15 team in the country, and then there was times it looked like they should be a bubble team. So they've been all over the map this year. What kind of UCLA team shows up to this game this week versus a Utah State team that is hungry and thinks they can definitely win this game? And then finally, we'll finish in the West bracket, and actually had quite a bit of intriguing matchups in this bracket. We're going to start with the 8-9 matchup, and we have 2-time defending champion UConn as an 8 seed taking on number 9 Oklahoma in this in this first round matchup. Oklahoma, another SEC team, of course. UConn, like I said, of course, going for the three-peat for a third straight national championship. I don't see that happening, but in this first round matchup, this will be an interesting matchup. Oklahoma has been a team battle-tested playing in the SEC. UConn's been an up-and-down team all year. Let's see what we get from this UConn team versus Oklahoma team. Should be an intriguing matchup there. Next, we have number 5 Memphis versus number 12 Colorado State. I think that's an intriguing matchup as well. I think this Memphis team, if they're hot, they can make a run. But if they start missing shots and start kind of getting a little bit out of their own game, that could be a real recipe for disaster for them. So that'll be interesting. Colorado State just won a very good Mountain West Conference, was a bubble team coming into the week, won their way in by winning the conference, and now that they're hot, can they take the momentum into the NCAA tournament? That'll remain to be seen. The 4-13 matchup. We got number 4 Maryland versus number 13 Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is a team, they pulled off an upset last year as a lower seed. They're a team that keeps getting better. Bryce Drew, their head coach, of course, was a tournament legend as a player, is starting to turn into a bit of a tournament legend as a coach as well. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see. The 6 seed Missouri finally getting back to the tournament after a few year drought there versus the 11 seed Drake Bulldogs. Mentioned them as one of my underrated teams. 30-3 on the season. They've played in tournament games before in the past. This is a battle tested team. I'm interested to see how they do in the tournament. And then finally the 7-10 matchup. We have Kansas versus Arkansas. Bill Self versus John Calipari. Sign me up for that in the first round matchup. That'll be huge. Arkansas went one of the lower seeds from the SEC. Kansas was up and down all season, but these are two coaches that have been around the block, coached in the tournament, coached in big games in the tournament. It'll be a great thing to see them play each other in the first round. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get to the most important part of this show today, and that is going to be my picks. We're going to start in the East bracket, and we're going to start in the Sweet 16. I have number 1 Duke versus number 4 Arizona. Go ahead and give me Duke to move on and beat Arizona and move on to the Elite 8. And then we have the 2 seed Alabama from the SEC versus the 3 seed Wisconsin from the Big Ten, and I have Wisconsin winning in kind of a mild upset, beating Alabama and moving on to the Elite 8, setting up an Elite 8 matchup in the East bracket of Duke versus Wisconsin. And as much as this pains me to say, I think Duke beats Wisconsin and moves on to the Final Four. Next, we'll move to the South bracket. And in the first matchup, I have number 1 Auburn taking on number 12 UC San Diego. I think UC San Diego wins their first 2 matchups, gets to the second weekend, gets to the Sweet 16, but that's where the buck stops. We have Auburn with Janai Broome, who's probably going to be the player of the year. Really talented team, really good team that kind of sputtered down the stretch. That's why I haven't talked about them as one of my favorites or talked about them as much, but I think they're good enough to beat UC San Diego in the Sweet 16 matchup and move on to the Elite 8s. And then we have number 2 Michigan State taking on number 3 Iowa State. And I haven't talked about Iowa State a ton. They've been up and down these last couple of weeks, but was a really consistent, good team throughout most of the season. Not enough. Give me Tom Izzo. Give me Michigan State to beat Iowa State and roll into the Elite 8 and take on the 1 seed in the South bracket. And that is going to be Auburn versus Michigan State. I trust Tom Izzo over Bruce Pearl in that coach matchup. Bruce Pearl has the better team, but not by that much. So give me Michigan State to win and get back to the Final Four and get Tom Izzo back in the Final Four. And then we're going to move to the Midwest bracket. And in the first Sweet 16 matchup, I have number 1 Houston versus number 5 Clemson. And this, I think, is going to be a tough game because Clemson is an underrated team in my opinion as well. But give me Houston to win and move on to the Elite 8s, when they will face a matchup between number 6 Illinois and number 2 Tennessee. I'm going to roll with Tennessee to move on to the Elite 8 and beat Illinois from the Big Ten Conference. So that sets up an Elite 8 matchup in the Midwest. So that'll be the Midwest Regional Final. It's going to be between Houston and Tennessee. Give me Houston to roll on to the Final Four. Kelvin Sampson, like I said, they know they're going to play defense, and now they can score with the best of them as well. That's a recipe for disaster for any of their opponents. So Houston marches on to the Final Four and wins the Midwest region. And then finally, we will move to the West, and we have the number 1 seed Florida taking on the number 12 seed Colorado State. Yes, I have Colorado State making out of the first weekend as well, making it to the Sweet 16, where they lose. And that will be the end of their run, and give me Florida to beat Colorado State and move on to the Elite Eight. And then we have number 2, St. John's, taking on number 3, Texas Tech. And this, I think, could be a really tough matchup and a really interesting matchup. But I like Rick Pitino. I like the St. John's team. I like how they play. I like the defense that they play with. So give me St. John's to win, beat Texas Tech, and move on to the Elite Eight, where they will face Florida. Florida versus St. John's. I sat there and looked at this pick for a while. These are 2 teams that I really like going into the tournament. I wish they weren't in the same bracket, or I might have both of them in the Final Four. But too much firepower for Florida. Florida's got too many athletes, too much firepower. They overwhelm St. John's and move on to the Final Four. And so I know my Final Four is a little chalky. I got 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed, but whatever. Final 4 matchups. First one is going to be Michigan State versus Florida. This one I looked at for a while as well, back and forth. But Florida, like I said at the opening of the show, I think is one of the hottest, best teams in the country as of right now, as we sit today, March 16th. They win and move on to the national championship. And then we have our second Final 4 matchup, and that is going to be Duke versus Houston. This is going to be a classic game. If Cooper Flagg is 100% healthy, this should be a classic game. Contrasts are a little bit different, but they both like to play defense. They both can score as well. Duke's a little bit better scoring team. Houston's a better defensive team. I think Houston's a better team. With Cooper Flagg may not be 100%. That gives them the edge there. Give me Houston to move on to the final and to the championship game. And then finally, we have our final. We have 1 seed Florida versus a 1 seed Houston. SEC versus Big 12. In my opinion, the 2 best conferences in the country this season. I'm going to roll with the conference that was the best in the country, and that was the SEC. I'm going to roll with Florida, the hottest team in the country, in my opinion. Give me Florida to beat Houston in the final. Florida is going to be cutting down the nets as they win the conference, as they win the national championship and get their 3rd national championship, their first since they went back-to-back in 07-08 under Billy Donovan. So those are my picks for the NCAA tournament for March Madness. Let me know your picks in the comments. DM me with your picks. Let me know what you think. Give me some constructive criticism there. Like I said, this is one of my favorite times of year, March Madness, NCAA tournament. I just absolutely love it. So I can't wait for Thursday for the first round to start. Even some of the playing games, I think, are going to be good games as well. But before I go ahead and leave the show today, let me just remind you, as always, if you like the video version of this podcast on YouTube, please like and subscribe right down here. Smash that like, smash that subscribe, leave a comment as well. However, if you prefer the audio version, you can find it on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe there as well. Thank you again for watching and listening, and have a great day and enjoy your March Madness. The time is here. I love it. Let's go.